we had some incredibly sad news this week as our sport and our industry lost a titan of the sport. Mike Leach passed away this week. And Mike was an incredible man, and I just wanted to take a few moments to talk about him, his legacy, and give maybe a fun story from covering Mike, playing against Mike throughout my career. First and foremost, this is a guy that will be linked, to an offense and a progression of football that now, is every bit a part of every level of football as we can possibly imagine. It's not just that it's been a highly productive offense, but it's been an offense, the air raid, that he will be linked to as one of its creators. And he really changed the sport. If I think back, and we all think back, to the really impactful moments of the last 20 or 25 years in college football, I think one of the most impactful moments is when Mike became the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma. And the reason he became the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma is because of this offense that he had built with Hal Mumme all the way back at Valdosta State, and then they were eventually at Kentucky together. So to know why he got that job at Oklahoma, you have to know, why did he build this offense? So the genesis of this offense was one of the conversations that I loved the most during my time with Mike during my career. And he was very open about it. And it was actually on a day in which, we were told, hey, coach is only going to have 15 minutes for the production meeting. And one of the questions that I had for him was, how did you think of it? What was the creation story of this offense? And he ended up taking 45, 50 minutes with us, just sitting there talking about the air raid and its philosophy. And I thought it was so simple yet profound. And it was just one of the coolest experiences that I can remember in my career. So Mike immediately began talking about two different offenses and trying to marry the philosophies of each into one specific system. And he talked about the schematics and the ability to throw the ball vertically like BYU was doing in the mid-'80s with Lavelle Edwards, and yet marry that to a philosophy that the triple option used, which the triple option at the time was anybody can touch the ball and anybody can be productive based on what the defense is giving us. They weren't going to be totally reliant in that system on one player or one wide receiver or one running back. It was just whatever was there to be taken would be taken. And it didn't matter which of the guys were producing. So he wanted to build an offense with Hal Mumme that anybody could produce on the field and that would attack vertically, in particular in the passing game, like Lavelle Edwards BYU teams. And that's how this thing was born. And then he starts having success at Kentucky. And he starts having success at Kentucky against a young defensive coordinator that was a coach at one of the best teams of the moment, which was a national championship team at Florida, and that coach was Bob Stoops. When Bob Stoops got the job at Oklahoma as the head man in 1999, he immediately hired Mike Leach, and the reason is because he realized that going against that offense was incredibly difficult, and that Mike was doing more with less than anybody else in the country. And then that moment, that changed the trajectory of college football and of that offense and of countless men's lives. So that's how it all started. And then Mike becomes the head coach at Texas Tech. And the coaching tree is extensive. All the guys that either cut their teeth under Mike or played for Mike, touched Texas Tech in some way, or even Washington State. There's obvious ones like Lincoln Riley. But Sonny Dykes is a guy who's in the playoff this year at TCU, cut his teeth under Mike Leach. Art Briles is a guy. Cliff Kingsbury, Sonny Cumbie, who's a great assistant. Graham Harrell was a great assistant. Dana Holgerson is a great. The list goes on and on of guys that coached under Mike Leach that have now gone on and impacted the sport in a great way. And every one of them will tell you, and this would just be my last point, that one of the most special parts about Mike was his ability to not care what others thought. And that really was his superpower. Quick story. In 2008, Texas Tech had a great wide receiver and a great team. Michael Crabtree was the reigning Biletnikoff winner, and Graham Harrell was their quarterback. That team would eventually go 11-1 and tie for the Big 12 South championship. Really one of Mike's most successful, if not his most successful team. And during one of the practices that year, he thought that they weren't good enough throwing go routes. And it was a staple in the offense running 4 verticals, 4 go routes. And so he thought, you know what, today in practice, that's all we're going to do. We're not going to practice run plays or any other passing concepts. We're just going to run go routes, whether it was routes on air or 1-on-1s or 7-on-7 or even team period. That's the only route they were going to throw. That's the only play they were going to run. Well, about midway through the practice, some of the other coaches are realizing hey, we've got a Biletnikoff award winner out there in Michael Crabtree. He's probably run 3 or 4 miles already of just go routes. And they said, Mike, we can't do this. And Mike said, and this is how he lived and how he coached, why not? You see, one of the best parts about Mike Leach was that he was not a prisoner of his peers. And he would think outside of the box. So often in coaching, guys are unwilling to think outside of the box or try something different because they are afraid of criticism and they are afraid to go out on a limb. And yet he was not. And his answer to his coaches of why not was then followed up by, at some point this year, we're going to have to throw a go route against a coverage that we don't want to. And we're going to think back on this practice and think, you know what, I'm glad we did that. And sure enough, fast forward to the game that Texas Tech played against Texas. One of the most iconic games really of the last 20 years. And the most iconic play from that game is the Michael Crabtree touchdown down the right sideline. That was a go route. And it was against double coverage, bracket coverage, and they had little adjustments and they could drop out of it. And Graham Harrell and Michael Crabtree knew that they could complete the ball and be successful in that moment because Mike Leach was willing to think outside of the box weeks prior where he just threw go routes against every possible coverage during practice. They were comfortable. They executed. Crabtree scored a touchdown, and that play will forever live on in history as one of the great plays in college football history. Mike Leach, 1 of 1, and he will truly, truly be missed.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoy that clip, make sure you click subscribe somewhere down here. From game highlights to exclusive interviews and rankings, we've got everything you need as a college football fan right here, College Football on Fox.